بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان.
Okay, the next chapter of the Hadiths, is a chapter that we have to really, many of you may find kind of boring, because it's the chapter that deals with business transactions. And the first section here speaks about deposits, non-returnable deposits. And let's look at the hadith. Let's read the hadith. Okay, this hadith states that one of the companions stated that he heard that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade transactions in which non-refundable deposits were paid. Okay, what does that mean? It means exactly what it says. It is forbidden in Islam to ask a person to leave a deposit with you, but you do not refund the deposit back to them. And we have to be careful of that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade transactions in which non-refundable deposits were made. Okay? So if a person tells you that they're not going to refund your deposit, then you let them alone. You don't deal with them. Okay, everybody understands that. Also, something else that's quite interesting here in this section here. Let's look at this thing right here. Nowadays, we have a thing whereas people want to rent the womb of a woman. For example, say you cannot have children. So you and your husband would like to pay a woman to be a surrogate mother for you. This is haram. This is haram, guys. We cannot do that. Okay? You cannot rent out a womb. Okay? You cannot set a price on a fetus in the womb of its mother or any of that either as well. So for those people who ask about surrogacy, surrogacy is haram in Islam. You cannot take your egg and your husband's sperm and put it inside another woman's womb and pay her. You can't do this. This is forbidden in Islam. Okay? So those are some of the things that we need to be careful of. Again, non-refundable deposits and paying for a womb. This stuff is haram. Okay, we're going to skip over the things about slavery. Since we don't have any slaves today, we're going to just skip over all the hadiths that relate to slavery. But I want you guys to know that Islam gave rights even to slaves. Islam forbids a man to have intercourse with a slave who is married, and prisoners of war. Like I told you guys, these women wanted to be right-hand possessions. Because a right-hand possession is a prisoner of war, a woman that's taken as a captive, but you have to treat her like she was your wife. You have to give her a home, you have to feed her, you have to clothe her when you clothe yourself. These women were just like wives, okay? So back in those days, a woman wanted to be taken as a captive so that way she can be cared for, her and her children. Otherwise, she'd be left on her own to beg in the street. That's not the same, okay, as what we picture slavery to be. Okay, but I want to share that hadith there too. And if the woman was married, a slave was married, they couldn't have intercourse with them. Okay. Let's look at the next section. Excuse me. This section addresses selling trees, fruit trees. The Prophet ﷺ said, if a palm tree is sold after it's been pollinated, the fruit belongs to the seller unless the buyer makes a stipulation. Let me make that in terms that we can understand. Say you have orange trees, apple trees, banana trees. Okay, you have an orchard, you're a farmer. If you sell your trees or your orchid after they have been pollinated, then the fruit belongs to you unless the buyer makes a stipulation about it being included. So this is something good to know for those of us who are farmers. I happen to live in a farm area. There's a lot of farmers here where I live. They'd be glad to hear something like that. Okay? Let's look at the next section. Islam forbids us from selling fruit until it's ripe, and it makes sense. How can I tell you I can sell my oranges to you when my oranges are not even ripe? They might come out bad or something. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ forbade selling fruit until the fruit was ripe. He forbade this transaction to both the buyer and the seller. So you cannot buy or sell fruit unless the fruit is ripe. Because again, you don't know how much of it will be good and how much of it will not. Okay? Next hadith, the same thing. The Prophet forbade selling fruit until it had become mellow. And he was asked what it was mellow. And the Prophet said when it becomes... Okay, let's continue on here. So again, you don't sell fruit until the fruit becomes ripe. Okay. Let's look at the next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ forbade selling fruit until it was clear of blight. That means it was ripened. And again, this goes to show, guys, how Islam is such a perfect way of life. You know, our Allah not only taught us how to live in regards to worshiping Him, but also, you know, how to deal with each other in our business transactions and everything else. Okay? So again, you cannot sell fruit before it's ripe. You want to remember that. Okay, let's look at the next section. And again, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff because it can, you know, I'm going to try to just touch on the things that may be relevant to many of you. How crop damage affects the sale of agricultural produce. We have a hadith here where a man bought the fruit of an enclosed orchid in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and he tended it while staying on the land. It became clear to him that there was going to be some loss, so he asked the owner of the orchid to reduce the price for him or to revoke the sale, but the owner swore not to do so. The mother of the buyer then went to the Prophet and complained. And the Prophet ﷺ said, by this oath, the man has sworn to not do good. The owner of the orchid heard about it and went to the Prophet and said, O Messenger of Allah, the choice is his. In other words, he said, the man can do what he wants. So again, what we do, guys, is, you know, you don't want to sit there, you know, and swear to not sell, to not help a person out when you see that your crops have become damaged. Okay? If your crops have become damaged by the drought or whatever, you know, you should try to work with the person to try to help them out. You don't want to sit there and swear to do nothing, okay, to help the person out. You should try to reduce his price or something. And this is what the companions would do if ever a crop was